was the veterinary surgeon for the Austrian Emperor at that time. And he was responsible for taking care of the Lipizzaner horses, which I'm sure you've all heard of, maybe seen on television from time to time, maybe you've seen them in person. Obviously, with a layout like this, there was a blacksmith shop somewhere on the property. And rumor has it that Cyril learned how to work the forge by forging his own nails so he could build himself a doghouse. Down below, you see a map of Austria showing approximately where Triben is located. Here's an early portrait of Cyril Colnik from about 1890. He was, because of his father's background, he had a lot of money to help him get educated. So at 14, he was apprenticed to an iron worker in Vienna. He also learned ironwork at the Graz Munich Industrial School. And at the age of 18, he was traveling all over Europe, studying with various master blacksmiths. That was the process by which you attained a master blacksmith license. Was you would go around, you would learn different details from different blacksmiths, and you basically get your credits that way. And the reason you wanted to be a master blacksmith, because only a master blacksmith could run his own shop and hire his own people. So here I have a portrait, and next to the portrait we have an ornamental drawing done by Cyril. I just was fascinated by this drawing because it's so intricate, and it shows that Cyril could have had quite a career even as a two-dimensional designer and artist, but he chose to go into the three-dimensional world of wrought iron. Here's another early painting of his, of a female face. And next to it, we have a photograph of a wrought iron cross that was created as an award at the World's Fair in 1893. Here we have a bird's eye view of the World's Fair in 1893, sometimes known as the World Colombian Exposition. If ever I could go back in time to see anything, I'd love to have gone back and see what this must have been like. Up on the top, you've got a photo of the Terrace style building. On the extreme right, you've got a photo of the administration building, and this was just a couple, as you can see, of all the major buildings that they put up for that exposition. And then right dead center, we have a Ferris wheel. That actually is the first Ferris wheel ever created, was at the 1893 World's Fair. Cyril Colnik had nothing to do with it. It was created by, and I love this name, George Washington Gates Ferris Jr., hence the Ferris wheel. At this exposition, which Colnik was invited to attend because he was so good at an early age at wrought iron work, he had this piece exhibited at the German Pavilion. And this is the thing he's most known for. This is the greatest thing he ever created. And it was known as the masterpiece. The significance of a masterpiece is that it had to show every possible thing you could do with a piece of metal. And by doing that, you started getting your credit as being a master blacksmith. As I said before, he was a student at the Industrial Art School of Munich. And that's probably where he started this piece. I don't think he finished it during the World's Fair. It depicts Vulcan, the god of fire, and the patron saint of metalworkers. I think it's rather interesting that Vulcan has bat's wings. I don't quite understand why Vulcan would need bat's wings unless he was fanning his forge. Also, some people have said that it's kind of an odd portrait of Cyril himself, and that may very well be true. What's interesting about this piece is you can see it at Villa Terrace, and you can see it from both sides. It's three-dimensional on both sides, which actually surprised me very much, because when it was first exhibited at the Villa it was displayed in a case that totally surrounded it, and you could not see the backside. And I just, actually for many years, I just assumed it was flat on the backside, but it isn't. It's totally three-dimensional. This was another piece he exhibited at the World's Fair. This is known as the Escutcheon. It's an iron coat of arms. And if you look at it closely, you can see on the left picture, it has two winged cherubs, and they're holding a wreath. And if you look just beneath their feet, there are a couple of human faces in profile. And then you have all these leaves and tendrils. And off on the right, you've got a close-up of one of the cherubs. And down below, you've got something that's really quite significant. It's Colnik's signature in metal. This is the only piece that's ever been found that he actually signed. And that's what contributes to a lot of the confusion as to what is Colnik and what isn't Colnik. Ironically, he did always sign his tools, but not all his pieces. This piece is also on exhibit at the Villa, and what makes this interesting is that it is on a hinge and it folds out like a door so that you can see it from both sides. And the reason that's significant is because this entire piece is done in what they call repoussé, which means Cyril hammered this thing out from the back side in order to get the dimensions that you see here on the front side. Just kept pounding away with small tools, little by little by little, until he had it the way he wanted it. And I just find that absolutely astounding. I'd love to know how long it took him even to do this one piece. It's fairly large. It's 30, a little over 30 inches high by almost 24 inches wide. Now we get into some of Cyril's connection with the Pabst family. Captain Frederick Pabst was exhibiting at the 1893 World's Fair, obviously promoting his beer. And if you've ever been to the Pabst Mansion, the entrance that to the museum now is through their gift shop. That gift shop was a pavilion that originally was built for the 1893 World's Fair, and it would have been stocked with, the various beer products that that Pabst had to offer. The fact that Colnik did not return to Germany after the closing of the exposition, but moved to Milwaukee, I think is a big reason for that is that Frederick Pabst hired him to start working on his mansion and other projects. And when you think of it, at that time, Milwaukee was probably the most German city outside of Germany. So there was no language barrier for Cyril. And you had all these major businesses being created with German ownership. So it was just a logical place for him to set up shop and start building his dream. So what you have here on the left is a window grill, which is on the north side of the mansion. And if you look dead center, the very small circle in the very middle, that actually has very stylized initials of Frederick Pabst. On the right, you have an iron plant stand, and that is on display just outside the main hall inside the Pabst Mansion. It's an interesting piece. If you look just below what you would call the tray, you'll see a couple of, I call them conquistadors. There's a couple of helmeted faces just underneath there. They're the only people that I can see on the piece. Everything else is plant life. And of course, at the top, you've got the Pabst Mansion in the very early days with the Pabst family in one of their coaches. Here we have the Von Trier Tavern, which is right across the street from the Oriental Theater. This is an interesting situation. You'll see this chandelier on the left and the upper right. That is the chandelier that's currently hanging in the Pabst Mansion in their main room, but it's not the original. That when the time came, they thought they were going to tear down the Pabst Mansion. It was originally owned by or last owned by the Archbishop of Milwaukee. When he moved out, the place was vacant and it looked like they were going to tear it down. And Carl Lotharius decided he wanted to save it. So he purchased or took, I'm not sure which, but he saved the chandelier and he moved it to his tavern. It may still be there. I haven't been in Von Trier's for a while. A year or so ago, they were talking about remodeling, changing the decor in Von Trier's, and they had the chandelier up for sale. They wanted $135,000 for it. Because of that expense, there were negotiations in previous times too. The Pabst Mansion wanted the chandelier back, but they weren't going to buy it back. So they hired Dan Naumann, the blacksmith, to recreate it. And he recreated it from his studies of the original at Von Trier's, plus a number of photographs. And that's what you see in the Pabst Mansion now, is you see the recreation. Here we have the Pabst Theater. More recent photo of the Pabst at the top. Cyril did the entire balcony that's just below this wonderful goddess figure in a half shell. Maybe that's Venus. I really don't know the significance of the sculpture. And then he did the entire balcony, not balcony, the balcony railing across the front of the building, which in early days was actually painted white, which kind of surprised me. But there are a number of cases where people did paint their ironwork different colors instead of just leaving them black. And I think you all know where the Pabst Theater is. And then we're talking 1893 to 1895 is when he worked on this. So it's not very long after he came here from the Exposition in Chicago. Right across the street, City Hall, also built 1893 to 1896. All the railings going up all those floors were done by Cyril Colnik. He made one pattern and then it was repeated over and over and over and over again. And if you look at the one in the upper left, when he hit a spot where he kind of turned a corner, it actually was bent slightly. These things are absolutely gorgeous. They have, as you can see, like dragon-like characters made out of flora and fauna facing each other with their beaks open and their tongues flailing. Two of these are on exhibit at the villa. They're in the courtyard, hanging on the inner wall, but they're totally painted black, and you don't realize the detail and just the outstanding workmanship of this piece. And you also, I think people take City Hall kind of for granted. It's a 9-story building, going to 393 feet. At the time it was built, it was the 3rd largest building in America. And the bell weighed 10 tons, and that was the 3rd largest bell in the world. I mean, that's just incredible when you consider, Milwaukee's always, worried about their image. Back then, they did something about it. They claimed the building cost $1 million. I don't know what that would be today's dollars, but it'd be pretty substantial. Here we have a photograph of Cyril and some of his men. Cyril is the man in the extreme right with a very dark beard and mustache and the dark hat kind of slightly askew on his head. If you look at some of these workers of his, they're holding little pieces of iron work that they probably were currently authorized to do behind the guys in the back. There's a couple of pieces there. This guy in dead center in the front, he's really hugging a piece of iron. It's a great photo. Upper right, you have an early postcard advertisement for C. Colnik Manufacturing Company, emphasizing his structural iron, and you see examples of it with the railings and the sconces and the window grills and lanterns. He's got a little bit of everything there, and statuary also. He was involved in some statuary from time to time. Down below, you've got the original shop. This was at about 221 8th Street. And that's the courthouse behind it. So you can kind of get an idea about where it is. I would say it's about where you would now enter the parking lot to go to the Milwaukee Public Museum or to go into the courthouse. It's very Bavarian looking, and it's too bad it got torn down because it looks like it would have been a wonderful German restaurant besides. Here we got a couple of examples of, start to finish. When I first started on this project, I found this sketch and had no idea where it belonged, what connection it had to anything. And later on, I came across this photograph and went, and now at least I got a name, Salomon. Apparently Salomon was a company. This is a door grill for an actual, actually for his home, which was on Jackson Street in Milwaukee. I've never seen any pictures of the home. It doesn't exist anymore today, but it does kind of show you how Colnik would approach some of these projects. There was no need to sketch in detail the left-hand side because it's going to be a mirror image of the right-hand side. So this is probably all he needed to show Solomon, what his intent was for this door grill. Here we have some lanterns that still exist today, as does the building. This is the home of the Frederick Pabst Jr. And this is up on Kilbourne. I would say a little bit west of 35th Street. I think it's all split up in offices today. But here again, I found this drawing and then came across this lantern and went and took a photograph of it. And there may be a few minor changes, but by and large, this was the lantern that he designed for that particular home. Here, unfortunately, I have 3 examples, and I don't know where any of them are, if they even still exist. We have a blueprint of a door grill. We've got a drawing of a balcony somewhere, and obviously a very ornate main entrance gate. Ever so often I go on the internet and I see if I can spot something or something that goes, oh, okay, there we go. But so far, no luck on these 3. If any of you out there know where they are, let me know. Here we have what's known as a wall pocket. This actual wall pocket is part of the Villa Terrace collection. I just found this rather whimsical. You've seen how detailed a lot of Colnik's drawings are. In this case, simplicity was everything. I mean, it's just like he scribbled this on a napkin or something and said, okay, this is going to be a wall pocket. Wall pockets were used a lot of times to put flowers in, and they would be just inside your entranceways. Here again, another example of a very whimsical clock. Obviously, the inspiration for the clock on the right. Cyril did not get involved with the clock works, but he did have contracts to produce what you would call the housings for these clocks with various manufacturers. Both these clocks are also on display at the villa. If you look at the one on the left, I find rather amusing. The 2 of the feet look like little dragon or little snake heads, and their tails curled up on above them. Here we got a very detailed drawing of a chandelier and an existing product. A lot of times, Cyril would actually have these his pieces professionally photographed, and we have a number of them in the collection, and all of them would be stamped like you see at the top with the name of the item and who manufactured them. But I've never seen any that said who they were done for, where they are, what they cost. That's just all, that all seems to be lost. If you look at the drawing on the left, what's interesting about the drawing on the left is he's showing you a head-on view, and then he's showing you a view from below. And he's also showing you in that section on the right that this particular chandelier not only had candles, it also was fitted with electric light. And hence those extra little bulbs that you see there. Here we have a sketch of a very, very rough sketch of a picture frame and an actual frame, which supposedly was a gift for his daughter Gretchen. I don't know if that's Gretchen in that picture or not. Cyril only had one child, so it could be maybe Gretchen and a nephew, somebody else from the family. Have no idea. But certainly a very flamboyant picture frame. The picture almost gets lost. Now we're going to show you a few things in downtown Milwaukee. So, and you can see these all without getting in your car. Up at the top, you've got the Northwestern National Insurance Company, 731 North Jackson Street, Wisconsin Avenue running right in front of it. This was built in 1904, 1906. At the top, that's an early postcard that I found of what the building looked like, which is exactly the way it looks today. So you've got a main entrance with these wonderful bronze gates and lanterns. And then you've got a close-up of one of the gates. And then down below, you've got a bronze balcony railing. On the side of the building that's actually Jackson, each of the windows that are way at the bottom, I almost call them basement windows, they all have window grills also, which are not as ornate as what you see here, but I'm assuming that Colnik did those as well. Here we have the Public Service Building, 231 West Michigan Street, built 1903 to 1905. Today, you know it as the headquarters for We Energies. So that's a rather recent picture at top. He did that entire entranceway, including that beautiful, beautiful fan light, which you see in close-up. What's interesting about the building, besides the Colnik work, is if you look at the photograph on the left, there's two architectural circular decorations there, one dated 1890, one dated 1905. The one on 1890 is a picture of a horse-drawn streetcar. And the one on 1905 is an electric streetcar. So it shows what progress was made. And the Public Service Building was gigantic inside, and people would go in there like you go into an airport, and they would wait for their streetcar to come through on the east side of the building. And you can see all those doors in the upper photograph. And then they would come out on the west side of the building and head to their various routes. The doors are still there, but the doors are now firmly shut. They don't open to anything anymore. But this is where the electric rail and everything else came out of this building. Here we have Mater's Restaurant. I'm sure a few have eaten there from time to time. As German restaurants disappear, I'm sure it's picked up a lot more business for people who really love German food. This is a chandelier that hangs very near the main entrance to Mater's, but it was not designed for Mater's. It was designed for Emil Shandine's home, which you see at the very bottom, which must have been quite the palace. It was supposedly one of the most fantastic mansions in the whole city of Milwaukee. And you usually associate the best mansions with the Grand Avenue, like where the Pabst is. But this building existed, well, how could I put it? If I understand correctly, it would have overlooked what today are the tennis courts on Lake Drive across from the the boat club, and across from the coffee shop. It was just gigantic, and apparently it got abandoned, and nobody wanted it, and it just was torn down. I'm assuming a great deal of other things were probably salvaged and ended up somewhere, and that's, thank God they saved this chandelier, and it's been in Mater's ever since. Shandines were related to the Paps, so it was beer money that helped build that particular mansion. Speaking of beer, here we've got Schlitz. This is on the Schlitz grounds. In the upper left, we've got a drawing of the Brown Bottle Tavern sign. And down below, you see the actual sign. And there were some changes, obviously. He replaced the beer bottle with this beer keg and some of the other tools of the trade. I'm not sure if the Brown Bottle is open again. I didn't know it was closed for a while. It became an Italian restaurant for a while, and then it closed again. I thought I saw an article a few weeks ago where it had reopened, and I'm hoping they've saved the Colnik items that were inside, because a lot of the chandeliers and wall sconces in the Brown Bottle were also done by Cyril, and they are especially noteworthy because he incorporated the ironwork with antlers of all types and shapes and sizes, some of which you'll see, well, like for example, the Pap chandelier, but not in that large a scale. Top, you've got a picture of the Schlitz Brewery building, one of the buildings, with the Schlitz logo, which used to always have this globe in the early days with like a belt around it with the Schlitz name. And then this is one of matching gates that took you off into the actual brewing area of the brewery. This is an offshoot of the beer company. This is the Eli Candy Company. The Eli Candy Company was created at the time when you were no longer allowed to have any alcoholic beverages. So Eli took their name, which is UIHLEIN, and created the Eli Candy Company, which is ELINE Candy. The Candy Company existed on Port Washington Road, east side of the street, just south of like Hampton. And here we have the blueprint for the gates, and we have a photograph of the gates. Some years ago, I was driving Port Washington Road, and that little gatehouse was still standing, but nothing else was there, and the gates are certainly gone. In fact, the gates disappeared for quite a long time, and then all of a sudden they turned up again in some farm field, and they were in pretty bad shape, but somebody saved them. Now what they've done with them since, I have no idea. Here we have the Hermann Eli Mansion. This is probably the greatest collection of Cyril's work in any single home. This was built in 1919. It's on 5270 North Lake Drive. It's just north of what'd that be? Pandals, I think it is. Restaurant. Just after you make that curve, there's like one house, and then all of a sudden here's this place. These are the main entrance doors and transom. A close-up of the doors, and the balcony railing right above the main entrance, which has a decorative motif showing the stylized hop that they used in creating the brewery. Inside, you've got this floriated iron balustrade with these consecutive panels going all the way up to the second floor. But none of them match. They're not like they duplicate from side to side. They change. You've got different patterns inside these these ovals as you go up. It's quite amazing. And the lamp that you see in the left photograph, the floor lamp in the back, that's Colnik also. I mean, it was just amazing. He did the grand staircase, their balcony railings, ornamental iron doors, the door and window grills, their chandeliers, their sconces, their torchères, the fireplace screens, fireplace tools, their indoor water fountains, and even some of their furniture. It's just incredible. When I was working on the videotape and DVD on Colnik, I had the privilege of going in there and meeting with Becky Rao, who owned the property at the time, and kind of got a chance to really tour the place. And it just was astounding. And when we premiered the video, it was premiered in their basement theater. They had their own little theater downstairs and a bar, and they popped their own popcorn. And all the members of the Friends of Villa Terrace were invited to attend and enjoy. And they had, I think they had 2 showings, but with a brief intermission. Here we have another Eli residence. This is Paula and Irwin, who are brother and sister. This is at 3319 North Lake Drive, built in 1913. That's an early photograph of it. It's on the west side of the street, maybe a few blocks north of Capitol Drive. At one point in time, I'm not sure where it's at now, but it was the home of Chris Abley. Now I know he's built himself. Well, he hasn't built anything. I know he's torn down a place on the other side of the street and intends to build there. But I went past there about a week and a half ago, and there's nothing there yet except I saw a very large deer running across the property. So here you see the gateway, the door grill for the main entrance of the property, and a close-up of the fencing that's on either side of this gateway, and it's a really sizable fence. It goes quite the distance. Here we have the Charles Alice residence, 1801 North Prospect, built in 1909. There are actually 4 entry gates to the property. They are, duplicates of one another, and they are all created by Cyril Colnik. For Eschweiler, and he did a number of things for Eschweiler through the years. So if you've got an Eschweiler property and you've got some ironwork and you don't know is it Colnik or not, there's a good chance in that case that it is. Here we have the Elizabeth Black residence, 2209 North Terrace Avenue, built in 1901. This is across the street from Villa Terrace and just a couple doors, let me think about that, east. She originally had a home on Prospect Avenue, and she loved this door grill so much that when she moved Terrace Avenue, she insisted that that be built into her new home. So it was torn out of the existing home and moved over here. Elizabeth Black was the daughter of a former Milwaukee mayor, in case you didn't know where maybe some of her money came from. His name was John Black. This also was an Eschweiler home. Here we have the Victor L. Brown residence, built in 1915. This is on 2691 North Wall Avenue, so a little bit north of Villa. And they have a huge, huge fence that has all these different floral panels. Unfortunately, the last time I went by there, the hedge had gotten so out of hand that it had grown through, and you couldn't see any of the details at all anymore. This again, another Eschweiler place. And here we have the August Galoon residence. This is at 3000 East Newberry Boulevard, built in 1914. This is right across at the main entrance to Lake Park Bistro. It's the corner home. This gives you a detail of the fence. It's a wonderful, wonderful fence built to enhance the Tudor style. And this was designed for architect Richard Phillip. Galoon made his money in the tannering business. It was A.F. Galoon and Sons Tannery. So there were a lot of tanneries whose owners did very, very well in Milwaukee through the years. Oops, went too fast. Just a second. There we go. This is the Harry J. Grant residence. I'm not sure exactly where on Lake Drive this is, but it was built in 1923. Harry Grant was the second chairman of the Milwaukee Journal, and he was well known because in 1937 he introduced the first employee ownership program in the United States, and they put him on the cover of Time magazine in the 1950s as one of the nation's great newspaper publishers. So anyway, he built this house, which if you look at the photograph at the top, has sort of a thatched look slate roof. And then he has this door with a number of 8 different zodiac signs. Why these particular 8, I don't know. I once asked somebody if he had another door somewhere where he put the next 4, but don't know anything more about that. Here we have the Joseph B. Calvidge residence. This was 2432 West Kilbourne Avenue, built in 1896. This shows you a recent photograph of the building. On the top, you have the main porch railing, which would be the first level. The topmost balcony railing has an angelic face in the center and these strange bird-like characters on either side. It is once considered the most richly sculptured wrought iron work in all of the city of Milwaukee. And then that little inset there is the building when it was the Roger Williams Hospital and Home for the Aged. And even stranger, it once was the Wisconsin headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. Here we have the Gustav Trosto residence, 2611 North Terrace Avenue. This was built in 1899. Another tannery, Albert Trosto and Sons Tannery. And his brother-in-law was named Adolf Finkler, and he was an architect, and he and his partner, Hans, designed the home, and then they hired Cyril to do the entranceway, the grill on the door. This grill that you see on the lower right is just below what might be like maybe their dining area. And then you have that wonderful ironwork in the staircase leading up to the second floor. The stained glass window supposedly depicts Prussia's Queen Louise. And back again to the photograph on the left of the door grill. If you look very near the top, above that horizontal piece, there's a little bit of a crest. There's a engraved T, large capital T for Trosto. This was quite a find. When I was working on the book back in 2010, 2011, what came to my attention, we were donated a bunch of materials which had a number of newspaper articles. And in one of those newspaper articles was a death notice for Cyril Colnik. And in that death notice, they made no mention of his work in Milwaukee. All they said at the very end of the death notice was that he designed all the ironwork for the Ringling home in Sarasota, Florida. And that led me to contact it's now a museum, and features a lot of the Ringling circus items. That led me to contact them and their curator and say, do you know anything about this? They had no idea. They said, well, what did he do? And I said, he did everything. Send me any photographs you have. So they provided me with these wonderful photographs. And the fact that article said he did it all, I can only assume he did it all. And why not? It's certainly, he could work in any style imaginable. Here's another couple of examples. If you look at that gate on the right, has some similarities to the entry gate to Villa Terrace. But these particular gates are to their breakfast room and to their, the one on the left is their grand stairway gates, and the other one are the gates to their breakfast room. I can't imagine going to breakfast entering through these wonderful gates. The house was originally known as Kadazan, which meant House of John. I have not gone to see it. I would love to get down to Sarasota sometime and take it in, as I know it is open to the public. And here we have Villa Terrace Museum itself. Here's an early photograph of the villa shortly after it was built. And then of course, it was the Lloyd Smith home of later on the A.O. Smith Corporation. On the left, you've got one of the main entrance to the Colnik galleries, and to the right, you've got the main gallery that has the most pieces in it, but it does not have the masterpiece. Oops. Got a sensitive mouse here. There we go. Here we have the dragon lamp. This is an electric lamp. 3 curved legs and claw feet. I'll say it's got clawed feet. And it's got wings, and it's got dragon heads. Just beneath the platter, 3 dragon heads come together and their tongues intertwine with the base along with the wings. It's incredible. It's 67 inches high. That tabletop is about 23 inches in diameter. It is at the villa in the same room with the masterpiece. Here we have a couple of pictures of one of 2 iron torchères with these curvilinear tripod bases. You can see this also at the villa. And here you have a couple of lighting fixtures. Now the one on the left is a sconce, and this is what I was talking about when I said brown bottle. This is the type of sconce that you'll find at the brown bottle, if they are indeed still there, using the antler, and it's connected up to gas light. I mean, you can see the gas fixtures there. Not too long ago, I had a local blacksmith from out west contact me. He bought the book. He loved this piece. He wanted to make a copy of it. And so I went over to the villa and I photographed this from every possible angle, even by laying on the floor and shooting it. Sent him all the photographs. He thanked me and produced a copy that was so exact, even the antler looked like it. And he sent me some photographs of it, and I couldn't believe that he was able to do that from just a bunch of photographs. On the right, you've got an iron candelabrum with floral features where you would stick that's where you would stick the candles in. Here we have a couple of botanical creations. They have no purpose. They are just strictly decorative. So you've got this candlestick with the leaf shapes and the flower, and then you've got grape leaves and tendrils there on the bottom, and you've got leaves, berries, and flower. Here we got a pair of smokers and close-ups of the tops of the smokers. The one on the middle there at the top, that strange little handle there is not a handle, that is a matchbox holder. So that's where you'd keep your matches, and then that lid would flip open and you could throw the ashes in and keep them out of sight, unlike the other one. Here we got a pair of floor vases. The vases themselves are identical, but the inserts are different. One has got a forged copper insert, and the other's got this green tinted, they call it uranium glass. And here we have a couple of fire screens with a close-up of the base of the one on the right. The screens are set so they could be lowered or lifted depending on what, how you wanted to distribute the heat from the fire. And here you got a couple of pictures of Colnik and his last studio. He's standing here behind an iron balustrade. I'd love to know where that ended up. It looks like he's got his hand on the head of like maybe a court jester. And then this, flamboyant leaf-like thing. And I'd love to have been there when they photographed this too, because I can't help but wonder the colors that might have been in this photograph, if it was the color photograph. I mean, between the wallpaper, his shirt, the tie with the polka dots, I mean, it must have been really gaudy. Upper right, you've got his last ornamental iron shop. When they tore down the one on A Street, he moved in here. Now, this originally was his wife Marie's family home. So he moved in here and he turned this into a shop. He had a small forge in the back. At this point, I think he was jobbing a lot of things out. I don't think at his peak, he employed like 40 guys. And then he still jobbed some things out to other shops who specialized in casting or this or that. But not in this case. Then at the bottom, you've got a picture of him in the living room of that house, admiring his masterpiece. When Gretchen lived there with him, she turned the living room into like a mini Colnik art museum. And most of this, all the stuff that we currently have at the villa came out of this room. And she used to, let people come in, and he would sit in an easy chair nearby and talk about his works, or perhaps she just sat and listened while she talked about his work, because she was one of his biggest backers. Here we have Wisconsin Memorial Park, 132nd and Capitol Drive, built in 1929. This is the gateway entrance to the building, and then inside the main hall of the building, all that ironwork, that railing, the lanterns, that was all done by Colnik. And this was done during the Depression, and in order to keep his men employed, he worked out a deal. He paid his employees, but he didn't get any money for this project. Instead, he traded it for the 3 crypts you see down below. And those swags that decorate the crypt, those are his designs also. This crypt is immediately below the main entrance of the building. If you come in through the main doors and you go to the back of the room, there's a staircase that takes you straight down. If you go to the wall that's furthest most, top of the wall, there it is. When I went there to find these crypts, because I knew they were there, they had a guide who took me everywhere. And I said, well, it had to be an early part of the building, because we're talking 1929. I mean, that he secured these crypts, and we ended up practically where I started. I probably could have found this on my own without asking, but I got a grand tour out of it anyway. And then I think I mentioned to you that periodically I do look around. I check the internet to see if I can find anything on Colnik that I haven't seen before. A number of years ago, the villa had a display on Cyril Colnik's artwork and blueprints. No actual objects, no photographs. And there were a number of pieces that were out of state. And I made myself a list of some of those places, thinking, well, maybe at some point in time, I'll be able to run some of these down. And voila, here we have some of them. Upper left, he did the entrance doors to the Willis F. Mccook residence. This is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 1906. Mccook was a businessman and a lawyer. He was a director of the Workingmen's Savings and Trust Company, and he's a director of the Equitable Life Insurance Company. And he hired architects Carpenter and Crocker to build a Jacobean Revival home. Colnik did a lot of work with Eschweiler, and a lot of his pieces were of that style. This place is no longer privately owned. It's now known as the Mansions on Fifth Hotel, and it's now part of the Historic Hotels of America. Upper right, this is the bear den fence that used to surround the polar bears at the old Washington Park Zoo. I knew that he had done a fence, but I'd never, this is the first I found not only a photograph, but well, it's a hand tinted color photograph of the fence. And it said it featured iron claws, which I guess are those things at the very top that hang over so that the bear will be discouraged from crawling over the top. Lower left, decorative panels. This is a bridge that connects the north and south sections of Forest Home Cemetery. So the real old graves are on the north side, and then the newer things, including the natural grave sites, are on the right. And you have to cross a bridge to get there. And there actually is, if you look at the lower right photograph, that's the bridge from below. There's two-way traffic underneath there, and a strange little mural also. Lower right, he did this cupola, which is on top of this stone well. This is in the garden of the Caleb E. Johnson residence. This definitely has a Milwaukee connection. Caleb was the son of the founder of B.J. Johnson Company, which was established in Milwaukee in 1864. He introduced a soap called Palm Olive, which later became Colgate Palm Olive. He built a home in Orange Park, Florida, just to go to Florida, and soon his daughter, Carrie, and Caleb built there as well. This is Caleb's home. He and his wife, Eleanor, commissioned an architectural firm in Milwaukee to design their Mediterranean-style home, which they called Mira Rio. It is no longer a private property. It is now a private member club. It's known as the Club Continental. And if you look at the lower picture there, they use Colnik's well as their part of their logo. So that's all I have for you tonight. I'm going to shut down my show and bring up my somewhat attractive face, if you'll just be patient with me. And there I am.
Here you are. Hello, Al. How are you?
Thanks, Al, so much. That was
Fantastic.
I find it amazing that all the familiar sites in Milwaukee, you see Colnik everywhere.
It is incredible.
It's really remarkable. You know, we agreed that we'd take a few moments for questions if people had questions, and I hope that they would. I found this fascinating. So I'm opening up the floor or the chat to questions.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? We live on Shepherd Avenue and we have a beautiful iron fence. And when we first moved in here, our neighbors said our house was worth less than our fence. And a few months later, a man who was painting a house nearby told us that he was an apprentice in Colnik's shop when he was a little boy. And we have always tried to figure out if our fence is a Colnik fence. Is there any way to figure it out?
Well, do you have any idea who the architect was of your house?
Yeah, I have his name somewhere, but I don't remember it.
I just disappeared. Is anybody seeing me? I don't know what happened here.
Right, you disappeared.
I disappeared. Also, I got a gigantic Zoom box here. Let me see if I can get rid of this.
Here, I know what happened.
Okay.
Scott S is
Sharing.
his screen. I just removed it.
Okay.
The architect of our house, his name starts with George. The house was built in 1917, but I can't remember his last name.
Okay. Well, if you give me your address, I could drive by sometime and give you at least take a look at it. I can't swear whether it's going to be Colnik or not, but a lot of times people have asked me about their gates and their fences, And one of the giveaways a lot of times with Colnik's work is I've never seen any of his ironwork fences or gates go right into the ground. They're always mounted in some kind of brick, stone, or whatever base to keep them off the ground, even if it's shallow, but the ironwork is never actually just right in the ground itself. I don't know if that's your case or not.
Ours is definitely all on walls and concrete. Do you have is there an email address associated with?
Yes, you can email me that information. Just go
You
to,
think it might be George Spinty that was the architect of your house?
It could be, I just don't
Possible, yeah.
remember.
I think he was a partner. I think that would make sense, and he would have been a Colnik supporter.
aha. Well, why don't you email me your question?
I'll see if I can put the email in the chat. So,
Well, I can tell them right now.
okay.
It's Strekow@strekow.com. So it's STREKOW@STREKOW.com. And
Thank you.
and I could look, the fact that he didn't sign anything creates huge problems. And then the other thing is, after he died and Gretchen Colnik, took over everything, she offered all the records of the business to the Milwaukee Public Museum, and they turned it down. They said, what do we want with a bunch of business records? So they were thrown away. And I'm sure if you'd had those records, you'd probably see in a column, here's who his client was, the address, what he did for them, probably the cost. It probably would have all laid out there, page after page after page after page. But
There's some Gretchen records at the Milwaukee County Historical Society too.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility.
maybe she saved one or two ledgers, because I mean, he was in business a long time. So he could have filled up a lot of ledgers with information. But that would have been the secret to finding out a lot of this information. The other way, you just look and you hope that maybe you can match, like if I come to your place and I photograph the gates or a fence, maybe I could match it up with some of the sketches that he did. That's what I keep hoping for, is to find matches because we got all these drawings with no reference as to where they ended up. So it'd be kind of neat if I could do that. And I can't promise anything, but yeah, send me your email and I'll certainly look into it.
Looks like Virginia Small has had her hand up for questions. So
Yes. First of all, thank you. This was really a wonderful presentation. And I have seen the display at Terrace, but this really made it much more real and alive. I wondered about there was a part of the gate from the sunken garden at Mitchell Park that is exhibited in the domes, and it credits Cyril Colnik. I wondered if you know about that piece. That was the sunken garden was dismantled in the 90s, and that was designed by Warren Manning. And so my other question is whether if of any other connections between Warren Manning and Cyril Colnik, because Warren Manning was a landscape architect who did about 60 projects in Wisconsin, most of them in the greater Milwaukee area, including a lot of work with the Pabst for the Pabst families, including the two landscapes just north of Villa Terrace.
What I can tell you is, yes, those gates are definitely Cyril Colnik. I used to have a photograph of them in this show, but I wasn't sure if they were still on display or not. They were set up in the main dome of the Mitchell domes, and I know they moved them around in that dome at least two different times. But they were discovered in a barn on county property. They'd been laying in this barn for years on the floor, and people have been walking on them, and nobody knew what they were. And all of a sudden, someone realized that they were Colniks, because I think they matched them up. There is a photograph in existence of what those gates look like when they were in the original botanical garden building, which was at the very end of or behind the sunken garden itself. And that's the building that was torn down when they decided to build the Mitchell domes. But you entered through gates that let you off into basically a giant rectangular greenhouse with, I think, a slight dome on top, kind of like a lot of the early botanical garden buildings like you see in major cities across the country. But they did set them up for a while. Even with the last time I saw them, they blew up that photograph of the that was of the original building, and they set it in the background, and then they mounted the gates in the foreground, and then they even put in a couple of planters, so with palms and stuff, because it had all these great big fronds and stuff on either side of the entrance, and they trying to make it look as much like it did in those days. But the domes has been closed, and I really don't know if you know, I'm hoping it's still there, because they said it was going to be a permanent fixture. But then we don't know if the domes are going to be a permanent fixture. So that's another problem altogether. But I don't know anything about Warren Manning. I'll have to look into that and see what I can find out about Warren Manning. That who knows what else he might have done. Thanks very much.
I can say that I don't know very much about the gardens that of those two homes, but Warren Manning also designed a garden that was never built. That was an Italian garden for the Pabst Mansion, but he definitely did quite a bit of work for some of the other captains of industry in Milwaukee. He never lived here, but he was the consultant to the Parks Department. He came along with Frederick Law Olmsted to begin with, and worked here for about 10 years.
That's real good company.
Yeah, he's I mean, I've written about him a little bit, but basically Warren Manning is probably the most what do you call it, like he's the hidden gem within Milwaukee as far as the work that he did here. I would say that there's probably a lot of homes that had Warren Manning gardens, and I just you know, I know a little bit. He designed work for UW, well, what used to be Downer College, things like that. So yeah, and I'd be happy to talk with you, you know, offline about that.
I mean, you talk about a hidden gem. I mean, that's Cyril Colnik also. That's why I got involved with Cyril Colnik. I couldn't believe how forgotten he was.
Al, I had a question. Are there Cyril Colnik societies or fan clubs, or are you like the world's leading expert on Cyril Colnik?
I don't know if I'm the leading expert there, you know, but I'm the local expert, I guess. But no, I don't think there's ever been a Cyril Colnik fan club. There was this, well, unless you count Gretchen. Gretchen certainly was one person Cyril Colnik fan club. When I was a kid, I used to watch Gretchen on television. There weren't too many programs to watch on television. So, I mean, it's amazing that a kid would be watching her, because basically she was like a very early Martha Stewart, and she would teach you how to make wonderful artifacts and collectibles out of a bunch of junk, and she always wore a great big hat, and a lot of times she wore gloves. And she had that show on for many years. And that was on Channel 4 and on Channel 12. And she was always, even though she moved stations, she was always sponsored by Mrs. Carl's Bread, I think was the spot. Yeah, she did that show from 1952 to 1966. She had that show on. And then when she wasn't, you know, running her little museum there for Cyril, she would tour. She was a tour guide. She went on like over 20 tours with people in Milwaukee, all over Europe and Russia. I met her only once. She was holding court in her kitchen, smoking like crazy, wearing this bright Kelly green dress. And at the time she had her hair was dyed bright red. And what happened was that once a year, Milwaukee Insurance, which was right next door, because her house, that house you saw, that last studio, was basically right off of Clybourne and almost underneath the expressway. And once a year, Milwaukee Insurance would open up their doors and bring in their agents, and then they would open up her house as well, because they maintained her house for her. They cut her lawn and did odd jobs for her. And the reason for that is that when she died, she left her house and property to Marquette with the stipulation that they had to sell it back to Milwaukee Insurance. And then shortly thereafter, they knocked it down and they expanded their building. Well, now Milwaukee Insurance is no longer in existence either. But the building still stands. And there's a part of the expressway where when you're driving west, you practically feel like you're going to drive right into their roof garden. So that's one of those little weird things about Gretchen. She also supposedly her whole grant to Marquette was worth $1 million. So they did very well by her.
Wow, that's fascinating. Any other questions from our group here? If not, I'd like to say, yeah.
Could I make one more comment?
Yes, sure.
So Al, I hope that you get to go to the Ringling house, the Katazan. I used to live in Sarasota, and I went to the Katazan. I can't tell you how many times. It is absolutely. I hope you put it on your bucket list, because it is. If he did everything there, that is one of the most ornate places you will ever see in the world. And if he did everything, you'll have to spend there a few days to see it all. It's really remarkable. It's total opulence. And my other question would be, when you do maybe ask if he did any work for the actual Ringling Museum of Art, which was right next to it.
Okay.
Which it's part of like a campus. So, and that's an Italian villa. So
It's quite beautiful.
yeah.
Maybe FLVT will have a field trip there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
I like that idea.
I'm
Yeah.
for that.
All right.
Do we go in circus wagons?
Mhm.
I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I'm thrilled that everybody was able to come over despite our link issues. I also want to thank again our sponsors, Angela Westmore and Susan Strecker, and hope to see all of you at the next garden lecture, which is next week. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Al.
Thank
Come on.
It was excellent.
Thanks,
very much.
Alex.
Nice seeing you again.
Thank you.
Strekow out.